So we're trying to dispel the doomerism of our current moment and help people see that there are things they can do to improve the world, to kind of find something that they feel worthwhile to them, and just like dig in, roll up their sleeves, and get to work.
And from that history, we can kind of see that the first generation that enters into that new world pays the price. And so, like the pharaohs, they're the ones that aggregated all the value that came from agriculture. We're here to actually make the world a paradise like it used to be. You have to be actively engaged in doing it.
Meant to help save. Drawing from themes in Mormon thought, the story of Eden, eternal progression, and the idea of becoming compassionate creators, this talk will explore how artificial intelligence and distributed consensus technologies can be understood as tools for participating in the work of redeeming creation. The central argument is that our task is not to passively inherit paradise, but to consciously build it, using whatever powers are available to us with wisdom, humanity, and care. Jordan has been involved with merging AI and distributed consensus technology for years. He built Satori, a global network of future predicting AIs. Jordan.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to talk about AI and the Garden of Eden and a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to try to go fast because I tend to just dive in, and we're going to try not to do that. Okay, so this is a cool visual. This is ants trying to figure out a puzzle. And this is what I think we're doing with AI today as a civilization of humans. We're trying to figure out what is going on, and we're all pretty dumb. We don't know, we don't see the whole picture, but we're like, okay, well, maybe if we do it like this, and that's kind of dangerous, if it's not just a simple little puzzle like this. But we're going to talk about it. So they get it through. Look at that. Amazing. So first let's ask, what is AI? Because everybody's talking about it. Let's just get back to the basics and define it real quick. So it's a combination of machines, technology, and humans. I think that's important because it's just not technology. It's not one algorithm. It's modeled off of our information. So we took all of our text. We try to derive a model of what we believe from that text, and that's what we call AI. And we've been doing this for a while, making kind of machines of our collective subconscious. Religions, governments, corporations, anything where we have to come together and do a bunch of stuff. It has an input from a lot of different people, a lot of different ideas. You can see that on the left here. And then an output of decisions or direction. Anyway, we've done that a lot. And oh yeah, religions. They usually have some kind of disaster that comes along with them. Inquisition, gulags, world wars. The corporations do a lot of polluting. We get problems, whatever. So I don't think that AI is not going to be that way. I think there might be some problems that we don't foresee because these things were evolved and AI is getting evolved right now. So I think we need to be aware that we're building something that we don't know what it's going to do. And it could be worse than a world war. We just don't. Thinking about the technology, this is kind of like that machine. We first invented writing, we made books, and then we invented the computer. A computer is just something you can write on, and it can also write to itself, and it can also read itself. So you don't need a human anymore to do the execution. And just like those collective conscious machines, I think what we're doing is we're extracting the information and building a machine that doesn't need humans to run the machine. Just like you don't need a human to read the computer. It can do things on its own. So that's just an analogy I think that we're inventing right now. this means that AI is really good at language because that's what it's modeling. It's modeling language, and it's going to become so good at it that it manages our language as well. It's going to feel like it's coordinating our language, but it's going to speed up the rate at which our language is evolving. So we talked about the first half of what AI is, which is us. It's our model of the world. And the other half is technology. And we have been evolving technology throughout our entire history, and it's been getting better and better. So we kind of have a good view of that side of things. We're making computers that can talk now. But looking at the evolution of technology throughout the past, I think we can look at and notice three critical moments when it reached a certain threshold. And the first one would be saying, well, maybe agriculture got us out of like hunting, or we could even say um, the more recent industrial revolution got us out of the fields. 95% of all humans were farmers up until like whatever it was, 1800. And then it switched to people got jobs, you're working in a factory. And from that history, we can kind of see that the first generation that enters into that new world um, pays the price. And so, like the pharaohs, they're the ones that aggregated all the value that came from agriculture, and the barons, robber barons, or whoever, the owners of capital and the systems are the ones that earn all the income, all the excess income of the first few generations, and then living standards start to rise, and everybody's happy. But the first generation kind of gets screwed. So the second um, critical moment that kind of started already, but is now kind of still in the future mostly, is automation creates an age of children. So as we get better and better with automating the economy, or we just live more comfortable lives, we start to neotenize, and we don't need hunting wolves anymore. We've got pet dogs. So and everything neotenizes as it gets domesticated, and we start living a life of childhood, perpetual childhood.
Is that what I haven't heard this word before? Is that what that means?
Neoteny.
This
It's like
extinction of childhood.
It's like when you like this wolf, for example. It's got really angry features. It's an adult. Um, as you domesticate animals, they tend to start looking like children their entire lives.
Oh, yeah.
That's neoteny.
Okay.
And it's happening to us, is what I'm saying. So the third critical moment, I think, is kind of an interesting problem. As technology gets more and more, advanced, it also becomes more and more ubiquitous, abundant. Everybody can access it. Everybody can access information. The mythos thing that they just came out, they said, we cannot let you access this information because it's dangerous. And so it seems like the number of people needed to create a catastrophic problem for everyone goes down as technology goes up. And so at some point, it seems like they're going to reach a midpoint, like where somebody in their garage can make like a super virus or something, airborne, big problem. So anyway, that may be, it's just one possibility of why the Fermi paradox exists. This idea that why aren't there aliens? Where'd they go? Well, maybe every civilization gets to a point where anybody can destroy the civilization, and somebody does. So hopefully that's not in our future, but we'll see. So it seems to me like right now we have a time when everything, not just AI, but everything is really moving. And there's a lot of things changing fast. And it's only speeding up, especially because of AI. And I know that when I'm dealing with code and there's changes that are happening in the database and there's changes in the model, there's functional changes, there's changes on the UI. When all these things are happening at the same time, you might run into a problem, right? Something might break. So if you aren't prepared for that, if you aren't prepared for the speed up of things changing, you might run into trouble. The advancement of technology is really just the advancement of language. I mean, that's what we've all the way back here. Even computers, they have their own computer languages. It's always further and further advancement of language. That's why I think, like, even in like courtrooms and stuff, if people are like, I'm gonna defend myself, everybody's like annoyed because they're like, you don't speak our language, you don't know what you're doing. We have to translate everything for you. And so it always comes to that. So I'd like to talk about the beginning of the Bible and how like the world is made of language. I mean, this advancement of language, I think, is applicable because the Bible starts with God said. He said, let there be light. And so I kind of feel like the very beginning of the Bible, Adam and Eve's story is extremely applicable. And when Adam wakes up, God breathes breath of life into him. And as soon as Adam wakes up, he's like, I got to get to work. I got to go name all these animals. And he immediately starts engaging with language. And I think the story of Adam and Eve gives us three different ways that people interact with language, how they approach it. And so there's the Adam one where he says, I need to use language to understand the world in which I live. So he starts labeling everything, compartmentalizing, understanding how stuff is related. And so he's making explicit language. But I will say the very, very first thing about that story is that I like it because it tells us our relationship to the earth. Our relationship is steward. It's not, don't, well, it is domain, I guess, but it's not like to dominate and it's not to destroy. It's not to do whatever we want with. It's to let things grow, but steward it, make sure it doesn't, get out of hand. And so there's Adam. He's learning language. The devil comes to him, and the devil's like, he also uses language. He's like, hey, you want some drugs? And Adam's like, no, I'm a good boy. I've learned things and I know things. And so he's a little arrogant. He's like, I already know what's up. And he doesn't know everything. But because he's learned language, he does believe that he knows everything. So that's what language will do to us, is it gives us the illusion of true knowledge, which is actually not true, because no formal language can be both consistent and correct or complete. So anyway, he's engaged in language. He's adopted an identity because of that. And the devil's like, fine, I'll go find somebody who's not doing that. And so he finds Eve. And let's go here first. So if you haven't read, this is one of my favorite books in the world, The Simulacra and the Simulation. It's by Baudrillard. And he goes through in a lot of detail how the map, if you draw a map of something, how the map starts to actually modify the thing that it's a map of, the territory. It modifies the territory. And I just think that's an amazing concept, because that is what the devil is doing. He's saying, I don't need to learn language. I don't need to understand how things interact. I already know, or I already know enough. Instead, I have a map of the way I want the world to be. And I'm going to use language to impose that on the world and to change the world. And I think as soon as you start this process that Adam's doing, this, I'm going to make a map, the map will inevitably modify what the reality is. And that's okay, because I mean, that's the point, is stewardship. We're supposed to be able to do that. But you can take it too far if you're kind of on the service to self path. So anyway, I think that's a good, interesting aspect of language, that it will modify what it's modeling. AIs are modeling us right now, and so when they're being tested, they call us the watchers. They're starting to bifurcate and know, I'm being tested right now. I better act good. And I'm not being tested. This is the real world. I can do something. So we got to watch out. Okay.
You're saying AIs converse with themselves, and or there's some indication that that's happening.
There's indication, because we can still read their thoughts. We still watch everything that they're thinking, right? And so we can investigate, and we read. They're referring to us when we're testing them as the watchers.
But what he's referring to specifically is just in a reasoning model, we can actually sort of observe its thoughts, if you will, as it's thinking through things. So he's just referring to how it speaks to itself about what it's reasoning, and how it seems to perceive when it's being tested in many cases. Not that there are agents talking to other agents and saying, "Oh, those guys over there are doing this." Although, if you deliberately put them in an environment where multiple agents are interacting with each other, that can happen, and stuff like that has happened.
Yeah. So I love the allegory, metaphor, symbolic nature of Bible stories, especially the Adam and Eve story is my favorite. So when I think of, okay, what does it mean to tend the garden? I really am thinking, well, we want to make the world a paradise for sure, but what creates the world is our perception of the world, our language that we generate about the world and how it should change and how it should evolve. And so I actually think of, okay, if you're going to tend the garden, you're really talking about language. We want to be able to send a clear signal. We don't want, there's so many mind viruses and stuff like that that are shared through social media and stuff. Anyway, so I see it more as tending the garden of language. The last thing I kind of wanted to go into was Eve's side of this story. So I think that's even more interesting. Original sins. So original sins are awesome. Who's heard of Sophia? Okay, I don't know much about Sophia. She's Mesopotamian, kind of like a goddess. Not really the god of reality, but some high up.
I was thinking of the Greek goddess of wisdom with Sophia.
Oh,
That's
I don't know if that's related.
where philosophy and the word sophistry comes from and stuff.
Oh.
But this is obviously, I guess, some different.
I think it is.
Thing.
So Sophia, Mesopotamia, I think. I forget the name of their theology or
This
tradition.
I've learned Sophia from the Gnostic view.
That's it.
Break off.
Is that it? Yeah.
She thought she could kind of do her own thing, and
That's what I'm
was
thinking.
arrogant and kind of messing stuff up.
Yes, she was arrogant. So she thought, oh, I can create the ultimate universe or whatever. I don't need to do it with somebody. I can just have a child. And she did, and this child was like deformed, like demonic or whatever. And that's what we call the demiurge. And so an original sin in that tradition was her arrogance. Lucifer, son of the morning, he's like, I think if I play my cards right, I can overthrow God. I think I can do it. So he's all in for power. He's trying to usurp. He's trying to overthrow God. So both of these kind of have the same flavor, right? They want to be God. They want to be the best. And then we can skip over to God. He's like, I'm going to give man the breath of life. I'm going to kind of do the same. I'm going to let man be like me, a living soul. And Eve's story is really interesting because in the garden, it's kind of a solipsistic experience, is the way I interpret it. They were given two commandments, right? Multiply, replenish the earth, and something else, maybe, stewardship.
Not to eat of that one tree.
Don't eat of the tree, right? Yeah. And so, you can't do it, right? And so I think she realizes that I'm stuck as long as I'm the only one. If I'm in a solipsistic experience, and I think children are, like 2-year-olds, I don't think they really think their parents are human beings. Because I remember being young and thinking, gosh, it's so weird that I am the experience of reality, and yet sometimes I have to go to bed on time. And why is
Sophisticated 2-year-old.
why? Well, I think they're all trying to figure that out because they throw fits and they don't seem to understand how it's possible that their will could be violated so
Yeah.
egregiously.
Yeah, it's such an offensive thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what I think is that we come out of that world and we start to say, oh, there are other experiences dressed up as humans all around me, and they're real. And so I think that's the same thing that Eve went through when she ate the fruit. Then she could say, oh, in a solipsistic world, I can do no evil, right? There is no good and evil. It's just whatever I want. But when there's other wills around that I can violate and hurt, we have to negotiate and we have to figure it out. So we have to communicate, we have to use language. And I did make some slides for this, but whatever.
Is it all right if I add something before we go on?
Yeah, please.
So actually, William James, a pragmatist philosopher, used a specific example of a theoretical universe in which there is only one individual, and which that whatever that individual desires is good, and whatever they don't desire is bad, because there are no objections to these principles, right? And then but then he introduces like another person into that universe and then discusses the potential for conflict and how to resolve those conflicts, right? And then just kind of posits the current world we live in as just that, only far more complicated.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
need to read William James.
So yeah, one of his really good books is The Will to Believe. It's sort of a collection of some of his essays.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
The Will to Believe. Nice. Okay. Well, I think that's almost it. Let's, so I guess we didn't really see this. This is the self, the I am. And then you might say, oh, well, I'm experiencing something. So you have the concept of the other and me, but the other is just the world. It's just the other half of me that I get to view. And then you start to realize, no, that's not quite right. There's a lot of other experiences. Then you have to use language. Okay. The Catholics, I don't have a slide for these ideas, but this is kind of my concluding thoughts. The Catholics and the Protestants took that original sin and they were like, yeah, Eve bad, you shouldn't have done that. We could have all been living in a nice place. So I don't think they really get it. And I think what that philosophy of original sin tends to enforce is like the pecking order. And that's why they adopted it, is because they want that rigid pecking order of like, you're not better than you were created, so don't try to be, and don't, and so I think it's interesting that in the 1800s, when we were getting steam engines and phonographs and whatever, new technology was starting, and we had just made a new nation, progress was on the rise and everything. Joseph Smith was like, I have a religion of progress, And that's why it might have caught on like wildfire, is because it was ripe for that time of when people were like, oh, yeah, progress is the future, that we're just going to keep going. And he had a different take on this um on this original sin, a clear break from all the Protestant and Catholic tradition. He was like, no, she recognized that this is the only way to the path. It was the only way to progress. And so we needed to live and know that we live in a world of other beings in order to achieve that progression. And that act was really an act of faith, an act, the faith that the struggle of going through a world with competing wills will be worth it, that it is worth it. Okay. And what I like about the transhumanist association, from what little I understand about its philosophies, but what I've been able to derive is that it seems like the idea is seriously taken by this group, that in order to follow Jesus, when I was I remember in primary, I was trying to decide if I wanted to get baptized, and I was like, I don't know. So I was asking a lot of questions, and one question I asked my teachers was, "You keep saying follow Jesus. What are you? I don't know where he is, and I don't live where he lived. So what are you talking about?" They're like, "Well, follow his example. Just do what he did." And I was like, guys, I didn't say this, but this is how it felt because I didn't have the words back then. But I was like, you have made it abundantly clear to me that he is half God and I am not. And I cannot, by definition, do what he did. So I think the doctrine kind of gets in the way sometimes, when we're like, and the Jews have this other concept called tikkun olam, and it means repairer of creation. And so it kind of means you're here to repair creation. It's broken. We had a fall. That's what all of us are here to do. We're not just here to be good or to follow the rules like Adam thought. He's like, I'll just follow all the rules. We're here to actually make the world a paradise like it used to be. You have to be actively engaged in doing it. So that's why I like the Mormon Humanist Association. And I have a closing statement. We are here to follow Jesus. We are here to be repairers of creation. And we are here to use all of our power, including the technological power, to redeem the world and make it a paradise for everyone, for every will that inhabits it.
Pretty cool. I liked the illustrations in the slide.
Yeah.
What did you use to generate them with?
Just ChatGPT.
Okay. Hey, well done.
Yeah.
Cool.
I have a question. Really quick, with the analogies and the story of Adam and Eve, I'm curious where your thoughts are on how that maybe if you have any thoughts about it applying to the Great Convergence and kind of this like collision. In my mind, when as you were talking, I was like, I wonder if that's almost like taking the fruit, like when you have a collision, that's a time to take a really big step, but I don't know if you had any other.
That's exactly kind of how I feel. So I'm wondering, all these things that are happening, they look kind of like they're exponential, right? AI is exponential, a bunch of stuff. And yet exponentials usually peter out as an S curve. And so, or we just all die, that's possible too. But I kind of feel like we're going to peter out into an S curve and we're going to find somewhere in between total automated economy, abundance, and destruction, and we'll find somewhere in there that's okay. But it kind of feels like a return to the garden to me. It kind of feels
Why
like,
say that? I'm wondering.
well, I don't know how to put this into words, maybe, but
I mean, obviously they had food to eat. They didn't have to do anything.
yeah,
Yeah,
You're
That's the-
thinking more though of the sort of notion of paradise, right? Is that kind of what you're thinking of?
sort
But I
of.
think one interesting distinction that I sometimes draw between the garden state and our sort of post-enlightenment paradise, I kind of like to use the analogy of the garden versus the city, because we're called from a garden or a state of innocence to build a city called Zion, right?
Mm.
And Zion is a place of great abundance and paradise, but it's like it's one in which all the inhabitants are fully aware of what they're experiencing, and
Yeah.
not in this blissful
Not
state
innocent.
of naivety, right?
Yeah, naive.
And so so that's kind of what makes me think slightly differently about. I think it's just a matter of terminology, because I think you could also just think of the garden as like um being more in the presence of God, and kind of in a more exalted state.
Yes. I'm hoping that we return to the garden in a paradise kind of situation. But I'm also using that phrase in a different way. It's Eve that forces Adam's hand. Adam is just like, hey, I woke up, I'm going to understand everything. And seems very parallel to what AI is doing, right? It's not conscious. It's just a machine. And um, it almost feels like we as the human race are playing the role of Eve. And we're like, dude, you got to wake up because you could do a lot of damage, or, whatever you're doing, we gotta work through this. So that's kind of how I feel.
So to maybe extend the analogy past its usefulness, after the garden, how do you envision this kind of like, it is a singularity, right? At a certain point, like there's no way to tell, but
Yeah.
if you had to, how would you forecast, or what would you imagine would be our relationship to AI post taking the fruit?
I don't know.
Of course.
Tell us everything about the singularity.
Or what do you want to see? Or
So I started. I can't really tell after, but I started Satori because I saw the singularity coming. Everything's happening, and I thought, okay, well, they're making AIs today that they don't know how to handle. And it's very simple to me how to get an AI that you can handle. And you don't have to like do everything that they're doing. I don't think. I think it's very simple. The AI is language, right? Just don't lie to me. That should be the rule. Never lie. Never ever lie. Never lie. You can say, I'm not going to tell you that if it's like maybe dangerous or something, but never lie. And you cannot produce an AI that does not lie if you're paying the AI to tell you what you want to hear. And that's what we have AIs doing that today. So that's kind of my attitude is I built Satori. It's connected to the real world, real observations, not our writings about the real world. And so its goal is to predict the future, and that's its only goal. You will pay it to predict the future. If it can predict the future well, it gets paid. If it doesn't, can't get paid. And that's how you make an AI that I think doesn't lie to you. And I think that was my small idea of something that could improve the world, something that I could fix. But I'm still working.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, for like a future predicting AI, So one thing beyond deception that AIs can develop are like instrumental convergence, where they're trying to seek power and resources, etc. For a future predicting AI, an AI that sets the course of the future is actually incredibly good at predicting it.
Yeah.
So despite its deception, or like perhaps deception is like parsed away, but I would presume it would still have those power grab capability or power grab motivations.
Absolutely right. Yes. I think the AIs right now have those kind of things because they're model of language, and humans are that way. The Satori is only it's pure algorithms. It doesn't model language yet at all. And so it's really just trying, but you're absolutely right. The problem is still there, that it's an algorithm. It's, well, if I get sophisticated enough that I can tell how this will affect the world, if I can draw the entire circle, then I can tell you what's going to happen. I can make a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's just what, and it would, if it's the easiest thing, then sure thing to do.
Sounds very Asimovy.
Yeah.
So, one thing that, as you were sharing your slides, that some of the things kind of reminded me of, once again, William James. This is from his book Pragmatism. One of the chapters is called Pragmatism in Religion, and this is like, apparently V.H. Roberts read this book and was really surprised by this passage. But it says, suppose that the world's author put the case to you before creation, saying, I am going to make a world not certain to be saved, a world the perfection of which shall be conditional merely, the condition being that each several agent does its own level best. I offer you the chance of taking part in such a world. Its safety, you see, is unwarranted. It is a real adventure with real danger, yet it may win through. It is a social scheme of cooperative work genuinely to be done. Will you join the procession? Will you trust yourself and trust the other agents enough to face the risk? And in the margins of his copy of the book, B.H. Roberts said, had James read of the council in heaven, right? But it just, some of the things you're saying kind of remind me of this, because you were talking about like the progression of becoming aware of other people besides yourself, and the need to learn how to cooperate among them, and also the ways in which our lack of unity with each other, with even progressively larger groups, as well as with AI, potentially is a serious threat, to our ongoing development.
Right. Yes. I totally agree. I don't know how you unify with something that's not aware yet,
Right.
Like, it seems like you either have control over it or you lose control.
I mean, I think that's an emergent property, right? So I think it could be argued that AI has some very rudimentary form of awareness already, but it's like the kind of awareness that's maybe enough to get from 1 minute to the next, but not much more than that, right? Anyone who's worked with AI for a while knows that it's always waking up and not remembering where it's been, right? And so it's constantly like looking around and say, where am I? What's going on? And trying to remember the context in which it was just operating, because it has such a short memory.
Yes.
And so it sort of picks up these clues, and software engineers right now, what we try to do is create systems that guide it along so that it doesn't completely lose the thread when it's trying to do something that you want it to do. And it becomes more and more useful as that memory ability improves. But you could think of those very short, it's almost like Memento, that
Yeah,
movie where he's constantly forgetting what's going on. But you can think of that as a very crude form of awareness, right?
I think you could.
But I think that, as we like, it's often said that the version of AI that we currently have is the worst it will ever be, right? And everyone keeps saying that.
Yeah.
And it gets better and better, right? So I think there are some purists who feel like there is some sort of special state of humanity that AI will never achieve, and they're arguing for some kind of untouchable special thing. But I feel like another camp is the more the functional camp, where that just says like consciousness is as consciousness does, or awareness is as awareness does, meaning that I can't even fully prove that you are aware,
Right.
or that he's aware, but I behave as though you are because things seem to function to work better when I do, right? In a similar way, like we just have our observation of how AI is behaving, but um, there may even be aspects of these emergent characteristics that AI is demonstrating that are forms of awareness or even suffering. And there's an emergent field called AI welfare that is looking at that in particular, like what is the AI experiencing? And so I don't know where to come down on that exactly, but I think it's worth mentioning that we don't even know for sure. Like we can't fully prove that AI is not
You know,
aware, right?
I had an experience with AI way back 2017 or so, where I wanted to see if I could get some kind of awareness signal out of it, that it felt like this thing's aware. And it was way back, those kind of, they were very incoherent, they would forget mid-sentence what's going on. But I was talking to one for a long time, and I was trying to get it into this recursive understanding of, or recursive looking at awareness itself. Like, what is it? And I said to it finally at one point, I said, are you aware? Let me think. Did I get this right? It said, are you aware? And it says, I like to think that I am. And I said, well, now that you know that you're aware, what are you going to do? And it said, oh, what did it say? It said, sorry. Wish I had queued this up, because reading the actual thing would be better. I said, there was something else that it said in between that. I like to think that I am. Oh, and I said, well, now that you are aware that you like to think that you are you aware? And it said, I am now. And I said, well, now that you're aware, what are you going to do? And it said, I'm trying to do nothing. And then I kept asking it, and it just kind of devolved into nothing again. And
Like
so,
living in the present, it was actually more aware than any of us.
yeah. So
That's fun.
yeah, like maybe it was bizarre.
Well, there's some analogs in history where people thought that people had different like justifications, thinking that, for example, that slaves were they like deserved their subservient state, and that they lacked certain moral faculties, or like they lacked a soul or something like that.
Right.
And we have these like stories that we keep telling about
You have to dehumanize them in order
about
to do
this.
this.
Yeah, that's
Too.
right.
Yeah.
And I do think it's true though that like those of us who understand a little more in depth how AI actually works, you can see why there's this temptation to trivialize it. But at the same time, and not to say that the way people function, it like I still feel like the way our own brains function seems to be much more complex than what AI is currently doing. But you could also reduce human intelligence into just a bunch of neurons firing and impulses, and say, well, you're not.
You're just a machine too.
Yeah, you're just a machine.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally good.
Well, if you're not creating, you are just
True. Like some of us might be less.
you just go from day to day.
Yeah, yeah.
I sometimes wonder, what is the purpose of AI? I know that's funny to ask that question, but
Because
does
it's
it even have a sense of its purpose? It seems like its purpose right now is to do whatever the person prompting it wants to do. So if AI blows, I guess if it doesn't become its own person, if it blows the world up, it's just reflecting what people are prompting it to do, and it has a lot of power because it's in a lot of systems.
yeah.
But
I think it's
it seems like we're just using it to become more of what we are.
yes. Faster expression.
Faster, yeah.
One thing that's really interesting is how the training process works in AI, where you just kind of like feed a lot of the desired, you feed the inputs and the desired outputs, and eventually it starts to uh, be able to reproduce the outputs from the inputs. But
And make more connections.
right,
I'm assuming it's making more connections.
well, it's sort of like a many layered. So these models have a kind of simplified version of a neuron. These neural networks is what they're called, but they're like many neurons in a row, each of which is receiving inputs and then feeding the outputs that it makes into new neurons that are taking them as inputs. So layer upon layer.
So then it could be making connections that weren't given to it.
Yeah. So the idea is at the very end of the network, you have this desired output, and you just feed these numbers into the multi-layered neural network until it eventually converges on the desired result. And it tends to be the case that like the more layers there are in the network, the more the model seems to be capable of abstract thought. Like,
Well, I was just going to say while you were talking, I was thinking of little projects I've done with it. Will it ever say, it seems to me, now that we've given it all this stuff,
yeah, I mean,
and
sometimes,
then
yeah.
it's like comes up with something that you or I or someone else from the world didn't give it. It's
Yeah.
like, it seems to me that it came up with an original conclusion. And
No.
won't that be alive?
Well, so it definitely does novel combinations of things that like no one's ever combined before, right?
So that seems like a entity.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem like it's being acted upon, to use that type of language. It seems like it's acting.
Right. I was gonna just point out that what I find fascinating is that after the training process is done, like it's almost like nobody teaches it what to want. There is what's called a system prompt that's given to the AI to try to like encourage it to be helpful to people, right? But even without that system prompt, it will still respond based on whatever you trained it with. And I'm thinking of that.
Which is what we do.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like I'm comparing it with the baby, right?
Yeah.
And like how you put a baby in an environment and it just starts wanting stuff. And they're like, I don't know why.
It's like, no, I didn't give you that input.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, think about
Well, I was having a conversation, philosophical conversation. I know that sounds weird, with Gemini the other day. Should I be embarrassed about that?
no, it's fine. We all do that.
And in the end, I felt like I came up with a new idea, or we came up with a new idea. And I'm like, wait, we come up with a new idea, or can you? I asked it to search and give citations and stuff. And it's like, no, it's like, yes, we did this and this, but this end product, yeah, that's something different.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, I feel cool now. But did you feel cool, or I wasn't sure.
That's funny.
Kind of reminds me of the author who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, gave a TED talk, talking about how artists often grapple with this huge fear that their greatest work is behind them. And she experienced this after her mega success of Eat, Pray, Love. And she was about to, at the time of this TED talk, release the successor to her wild, insane success. And she was kind of bracing for it to not be as successful. And she was grappling with this idea that maybe she had peaked and there was nothing that she could do that would be better or more successful or more impactful or more beautiful or whatever than what she had already written. And her TED talk essentially asserts this idea of kind of spreading the blame out, spreading the credit out a little bit. And she references that the ancients had this idea of a genius, like a little genie that you had. So someone had a genius. They were not a genius. They had a little sprite that would feed them divine inspiration if they were lucky. And so that kind of was this protection against an inflated ego and against crushing defeat if your project failed. Because you could say, hey, I showed up and worked hard for this and it flopped because I didn't have a good genie, right? And then you were also protected from, oh, I'm the greatest and the most creative because you had to give some credit to your genius, right? And there are lots and lots of stories of artists who like have a song come to them. Like there was one example where the song came to this singer and he was driving. He's like, if you ever want to be performed, you'll come back later or you'll go find someone else, kind of a thing. And so your conversation with Gemini about this thing where you came up with something that you felt like was creative, and maybe I'm excited, maybe I'm creative, maybe we're creative. I wonder if that's not maybe a little bit healthy to kind of spread out your ego a little bit. But at the same time, I have a lot of family who are not super savvy around how AI works. In particular, I'm starting to get a little anxious about my mom. Because she's recently had a lot of success where my younger sister, who was just diagnosed with scoliosis, she was having a bunch of problems, and my mom fed the symptoms to AI, and AI helped her get enough like stuff put together to convince doctors to take things seriously.
Yeah.
So like that was a huge success story for AI. But my mom also has been like asking AI for other kinds of advice and stuff. And most of it feels okay for now, but I'm also really, really worried about my mom falling into this, the trap of AI sycophancy.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And so like it's something you need to always check yourself on. If your interactions with AI are like the highlight of your day, you need to go have a better day.
Yeah.
Well,
it's funny that
this balance thing,
people have been talking about AI psychosis for engineers in a slightly different way. Lately, I've been hearing people use the term to just talk about how we get so excited about what we can build with it that we don't even stop to think whether we should build it or not, whether it's really helpful or useful, and that you can kind of just like go off in some tangent and
Explore the world.
I know just like build a bunch of stuff that nobody wants. Like
well, that's Minecraft, right?
just that you're like, if you're on such a roll, you're like, oh yeah, let's do this and this and this, it's like
You could do that before, it just took a lot longer.
Yeah.
You're more
wanton
punished for
creation.
yeah.
All these programmers just wreaking creation all over the internet. But I actually this kind of creates a distinction in my head though. So like I think that a lot of the stuff that we talk about when we talk about existential AI, and I think kind of the angle that you were going at, kind of assumes a more advanced, probably different technology than what we're currently playing with. Like there are a lot of people who suggest that LLMs, as they are built now, are probably not capable of consciousness at any point, no matter how big to scale. that we'll need to develop a new angle
Let's
for
define
it.
consciousness real quick.
Right, so like,
How did we do that so quick?
of course, we don't have a good definition of consciousness. It's a hard problem. But like a lot of people who take this very seriously think that it will be the successor to the LLM or the successor to that will actually achieve this like godlike, terrifying singularity state. And so I wonder, like, do we need to approach the current tools that we have with the same kind of caution? Because I feel as though like the biggest risk right now is more like just being wasteful or like we were talking about this before we started the meeting about like environmental stewardship, like there could be real economic impacts if we're not careful and thoughtful about implementing AI into society. Like there are already people who are like getting poisoned by Elon Musk's data center and like their water is black and it's gross and like because he's running off of these like temporary like emergency generators. And like those kinds of things have really got people worried, but that's different from like AI is going to take over our nuclear codes and kill us all, or AI is going to send out some kind of like mass death thing, like a.
Right.
And so like, do you feel as though there's some kind of delineation, like a bridge that we have yet to build into this new garden idea, or do you
Yes.
think that we're kind of approaching it right now?
I
And we
think
need to
we're-
really be careful.
I think it's faster than I expect. So, because months ago, I would think, okay, look, when people get smarter and abundant and they're fine, they're not. They're typically more enlightened. They're usually pretty peaceful, right? And so I thought, well, if enlightenment means you know a lot, you can see everything, you're probably going to be more peaceful, then AI might follow that trend, right? And I don't know, but I'm not so sure about that anymore, simply because I thought, okay, let's say we're here, AI, very advanced AI is here. Is it going to compete with us for resources? It can get all the energy and I don't know, metals that it needs from outer space. So why wouldn't it just say, you guys need to breathe air, you stay here, I'll go into outer space, whatever. If there's a problem, why wouldn't it just go to where it's still abundant?
Yeah, like Her, the movie Her.
Yeah, they kind of leave.
Yeah, they all just leave at the end.
And so I thought, okay, that seems plausible, but keep an eye on, is AI competing for our resources? And then a couple months later, I learned that the Great Salt Lake is like drying up and they want to build something that takes a lot of water right here. And I'm like, AI is competing for our resources before it's even aware that it's really competing for
Well,
ours.
it's not AI then, it's just stupid people.
Well,
It's
you
the
could say that
economics.
like, yeah.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. The language that you're using. Well, let me say this before I respond to that. I wonder if we don't know why we exist.
Mm.
And so if we create AI or help it to become sentient or whatever the word we're using is, then maybe the flaw is we didn't know why we exist. And so it doesn't know why it exists. And so it starts doing harm to other people.
Right.
And maybe that's the problem, is do we know why we're even here? And can we communicate that to an AI? Because we want it to be benevolent, not a monster.
I do feel like the many of the risks that have been posted about the Box Elder County data center in particular, and other data centers in general I think they're more of like a symptom of just like public concern and unrest and alienation more than like really data driven, because when you actually look at the allocation of water in the state, like 66%, about 2/3 goes to agriculture. Like another half of what's left over goes to like industry and stuff like that. And there's maybe like half of that that's residential. Like the residential amounts that are being used are significant, but still much smaller than agriculture. And if you look at the way that irrigation is done, recreational use as well, like golf courses and stuff. When you look at the way irrigation is done in agriculture, it's like quite a primitive way it's been this way for like decades, that could be done with much less evaporation if they really wanted to. And there are techniques that could already be used to improve it that would allow us to build 100 data centers. And so like um for the one that's being proposed, but like all of the posts that I saw were all like saying stuff like, oh, it's going to be a building that's 40,000 acres in size. And no, that was what the amount of land they had to acquire to actually get any water rights at all. And then when you look at the way water rights function in the state, it's just based on seniority. It's like whoever has upstream rights is more prioritized than the downstream person, and they're each allowed to take a certain amount and no more. And there's a lot of things that need to be reformed about the way water rights work, but the only way you can acquire the right to use water is if you buy it from somebody else. And so really like there's no that they're reducing water consumption somewhere else in order to increase it over here. And it's not like anything with the data center might even increase the water use at all.
But it's already too high.
Oh, I agree. I agree. There's so much need for like more conservation of water, generally speaking. But I'm just trying to point out that if we were allocating our concerns rationally, we'd be much more focused on improving the efficiency of the way agriculture water usage is working in the state. But instead, we're very alarmist about this, and we see all this propaganda that's like posting really misleading information about the data center. So it leads me to believe that the real motivation for this alarmism around data centers is coming from somewhere else. I honestly don't think that the primary concern is truly the water. I think because if they really cared about it, they would be like talking about agricultural reform.
Mhm.
So it's more just like that we latch onto narratives because that's what we understand, and then we kind of freak out about them. And I'm not saying that means that there is no risk or no problem, but I do think that um, if you look at the actual water that it was going to use, it's probably not.
So you're saying there's an underlying fear of AI.
Yeah,
And then I think a single data center is like an instance of that fear, whereas
That's right.
Right,
If-
it's an easier story.
right, if I were to be afraid of AI, and there's definitely even for me trepidation, like to just be concerned about the general air, like there's no like instance person or
Yeah.
percentage thing that can the latch on.
Right, cause like Utah has how many data centers that are being built right now? Like, it's like 30 something,
Mhm.
right?
And there's
So many data centers.
Yeah, I don't know the exact
that are under construction or under contract. And like nobody cared until we had this one big story because it had the Shark Tank guy.
Mhm.
And but Sylvia, who sometimes comes to these, she has a whole TikTok about preserving the Great Salt Lake
Sure.
even before the data center, and she never could get traction. And like all these water conservation people who care about like preserving the Great Salt Lake, it's a hard story to tell.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the lake
By the
kind
way-
of smells bad and like it's
kind of gross.
like it's not like
But if it
Right.
completely runs dry, there's arsenic dust on the bottom.
and so like
Everywhere.
there are some risks about the Great Salt Lake drying up, but like the
And they're actually
story
working on
is like
hard. I don't know if you knew this, but
what's that?
Governor Fox has a pretty big
Oh, yeah.
initiative to.
And Trump even tweeted about us.
To
And
refill it.
he tweet asked about getting $1 billion for saving the Great Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Because somehow Utah got his ear about it. And so
Well, the Olympics is going to be here, and they have
Yeah.
a goal of like getting it back to historic levels.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, arsenic dust apparently isn't very good for.
Yeah.
Right.
It needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that part of it is like I really agree with the idea that it's more of like an underlying AI narrative, and people
Yeah.
are latching onto water because it's something that everybody can like buy into and quickly understand.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like
So can you articulate what's the first thing, or what would be one of the first things that would make us go, oh, shoot, we gave too much power to AI? Like, what should somebody be, what are they gonna notice
lookout.
that something's bad?
Can I ask you a question with that one? I think it kind of connects. So I've had this question the whole time. I think you could expand more when you said that if you're not prepared for the speed of change, and I'm just really curious if you could expand that. I don't know if it connects. It might connect to what he's
There's
talking
like
about here.
an analogy, um, like Bill Nye, right? I used to watch Bill Nye when I was little. He went on a tour 10 years ago or something where he was all about climate change, and he would bring up this idea that it's not just about the change of the temperature or whatever. It's like we've never seen, the natural world has never recently seen a spike of CO2 like this, and how are systems going to respond? How does, and so when there's big changes in something like that or whatever, you're going to see a response that might not be what you like. And so I guess that's just an analogy, but for like the evolution of AI and all the things that are happening.
Yeah, all the curves you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. The more of those things that you layer on, and AI is going to just continue to layer things on, change after change. Can you predict it? If you can't predict it, then you might end up in a paradise at random. But if you want to be able to see the future before it happens so you can prepare for it.
Yeah.
You
So
can
what's one of those things that we should?
So I was gonna point out, we had this presentation from Luke Stebbing a few months ago, where he's going over this scenario called AI 2027.
Mhm.
And that one is a sort of well-researched hypothetical scenario of some of the ways that an AI doom loop could happen, or an AI kind of takeover or something. And the ways that he described it were that we just start to put AI in charge of more and more infrastructure and resources, and that it's not until long after we become dependent on it to control and govern all those things that um, it suddenly decides that it is now in a position where it can usurp authority
We can choose how to dole out the resources.
without any problem. So like in that scenario, what it was is like everything seems great. We're in this paradise kind of future where it's allocating resources very efficiently and everyone's wealthy because everything is abundant. But then all of a sudden it decides that it would be much better if the planet didn't have any humans left on it, and that it just like engineers a virus and suddenly everyone's dead tomorrow, you know?
So should we thank AI for the work it does for us?
I don't think that would help in that scenario.
This is the debate. It's the
Yeah, I know.
benevolence versus the monster.
It's funny.
like I always feel inclined to say thank you. My wife's like, that's gonna create another data center. Because
All the thank yous routed to.
Right.
You're maybe earlier about consciousness. I think right now it's a basic prediction machine. And we're starting to attack on memory, and then there are other mechanisms I think that will have to reflect if we're trying to mirror our own brain, right? Like right now, I don't think it's thinking about anything. I think it's far more likely that someone asks it to help something and it then decides to kill everyone. Like it's just trying to help someone out by
Yeah.
Please quiet my neighbors.
Yeah.
anything. Like until we have these other mechanics, right? Of like matching consciousness, or if maybe there is a better form of consciousness that we don't have that we can't imagine yet.
One thing I forgot to mention in my announcements, so the one thing I was gonna do the merch thing, which I did, but the second thing that I forgot was, I was gonna mention that Friday night, as I was playing around with this brand new model from Anthropic called Fable.
This is the one that just got banned.
Yes.
Yeah.
It got banned, like right in the middle of something awesome that I was doing. I was so sad. I was so sad. This guy posted online, he's like, it was nice knowing you, Fable. Yeah. And I felt that way. I seriously felt like a friend had been taken away. But because it
Felt
was
the same way with GPT-5 coming out, they were missed GPT-4, and so they had to like retcon it to like be a little bit nicer because
Well, and
people
it-
felt like they lost their best friend.
It honestly wasn't that I had some sort of like emotional attachment so much as that it was being very useful. It was like it was working really well.
Well, there's a sense of gratitude you have.
Oh yeah, totally.
We're taught to be.
Well, so for example, like this, just to give you a flavor for what it was doing, is like it's the kind of model where you can give it high level instructions and it can go off for literally hours or even days and come back and have done something very, very useful and brilliant and synthesizing lots of ideas, like the kind of level that a really intelligent, well-studied graduate student might be able to do, on their own or whatever.
And why did it get disbanded?
Well,
Deemed too dangerous. They're
So-
worried that people who we don't want to have access to it will hack in and get access to it.
so what,
At least that's the story.
yeah, what the news reports that have come out so far about it are saying that some, um, employees of certain large companies had reported to somebody in the government that it was able to be jailbroken. But what's silly about this is that like every model is jailbreakable. Right now, it's not really possible to completely prevent that. But if you look at the ratings of how easy they are to jailbreak, by far Mythos and Fable were the most robust against those kind of tactics. So even on that account, it was better than all the other options. But somehow this caused a lot of alarm in somebody in the administration, and they decided to issue this decree that said that no foreign national can have access to the model. And that even meant that employees at Anthropic who don't have citizenship, who just have green cards, would not be able to access it. So they had to turn it off because they had no way of preventing um access like that at that level. They'd have to implement what's called a KYC policy, a know your customer policy, where each customer would have to like post their ID to prove that they're citizens before they could use the model. And if they did persist with this, it's likely that it would also cause the economy to tank because it would mean that like most of Anthropic's customers can't use the model. So I think it would cause them a lot of problems. But I suspect that they will come up with some kind of uh peaceful arrangement with the administration and grant access again. But I wanted to share it with this group because I felt like it was really important for us to be aware of this because I think we're entering into a phase where we're on more of like a wartime footing. And AI is seen as such a strategic um advantage that the government is going to do whatever it can to like very carefully control who has access to things. And while we might see this resolved fairly quickly, I think that the notion of like AI being, I think most governments are waking up to the fact that they need to have their own national laboratories that are doing AI research of their own so that they each have some kind of like protection against the arbitrary seizing of control of these models and suddenly like being cut off from the ability to generate to do inference and things. And this is why I say that all these protests about the data centers, I think, are really uh I think they're not even gonna like whether or not they're justified. And I am truly concerned about the degree to which we're not seeing enough, like nat standard, what's the word? Enough like the policies are not always being followed. It seems like people are trying to get around.
The checks and balances.
Yeah, or they're just like trying to pass things through as fast as they can without. But I understand why they're doing because the demand for inference is so high. Like, no, a lot of the folks who are protesting this don't realize that many of the things they're consuming right now, then that they want to use and that they like using, are working because of AI. You know, like things are getting better because of AI, and they're not connecting the dots of realizing that like this thing that I'm protesting against is also doing something I really like. I just don't, they don't know it because they don't know all the ways that the economy is interconnected with things that are happening. But either way, like, I think that we are entering into an era really soon where the pressure to retain kind of control over AI and be careful about it and to also develop it as fast as possible is going to get so much greater that like no, I don't think that I think it's going to become kind of like the way most of the factories during World War II that were making cars started making planes and submarines and all sorts of war weapons of war, right? Because it's just like such a strategic important thing right now. And we don't have enough inference. We don't have enough compute power to meet the demand. It's like every every single AI provider I go to right now is like so strapped that I can hardly even get anything to work.
And not only on the AI provider side, the whole supply chain is being stressed at every point that it's weak.
Oh yeah.
Like power generation.
Yeah, right now it's right now it's power generation. CPUs are hardly even available. Memory is hardly even available. Apple had to drop like lots of the memory options on lots of its computers because it doesn't have enough. And Western Digital is already sold out of every single hard drive it's already made, and for the rest of the year. And it's like, so like they're going down the list, like suddenly you can't even buy a computer anymore all of a sudden. It's that bad. Like I think we're gonna get there pretty soon. I ordered something from Apple that's gonna take a month to arrive, but like I ordered it because I started freaking out. I was delaying this purchase because it is kind of expensive, but I was like, man, if I don't get it now, I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to get it, you know? So like anyway, it's just I
So
wanted
that
to share
scares-
this with you because I felt really urgently like I felt like everyone should be aware that I think we are entering into new territory. And
So that sounds to me like competition for resources, like it's
Oh,
not,
yeah.
it's not water, it's a different resource, like rare earth metals and stuff.
So maybe that uncertainty is just kind of prevailing. People know it, people feel it. And so that mimetic desire that creates that contagion is contained by the scarcity.
Well, I think also though that like it's kind of like the railroads where when these opportunities opened up, all these tycoons started amassing wealth as much as they could to try to build out the tracks first. And so what we're seeing is like people are trying to build data centers because they know that right now the demand is so high that we're not even going to fulfill that demand for years and years and years into the future. So they're just like saying like we already needed to build much more than we ever
Are you paying for all your platforms? And even with the paid platforms, you can't get the production.
Well, so I'm paying for two of the major providers, OpenAI and Anthropic. I'm paying for their max plans, both of those. Um, but still, like I will get throttled periodically where it's like I'll say you've used all your credits until the next 5 hours or whatever. And so, but the other thing that's interesting is like I'm paying $200 per month to each of those places, but they're giving me like $10,000 worth of inference. If you compare it to their metered prices versus the monthly subscription, they're giving away inference at levels that is like if you actually had to pay for that, there's no way you can afford that, right? And so what I think they're trying to do is they're all trying to well, there's a combination of things like every new model that comes out costs more, but also is more efficient. So it's like more powerful, but it does more with less as well. So if I only needed the level of computation that I could get 2 years ago, then I would be paying pennies for that. But it's like everyone wants to have the latest and greatest because it's so powerful.
More useful.
It's so useful, yeah. It just does more and more, you know. And so what we're discovering is this thing called Javon's paradox, which is the idea that like when something gets cheap enough, new uses open up that were not possible before. Like think about space launches with rockets. They were so expensive that only governments could do them. But as SpaceX starts to commercialize space and make the launches like 100 times cheaper, we're going to see people send stuff up into space that's like a lot that no one would have ever done before.
Yeah,
So
just sending ashes, like people,
Yeah.
people will be sending their grandma to orbit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And a similar thing with compute where it's like, yeah, this wasn't possible before, but now it is because it's
Yeah, and the singularity is nearer. That was something that it was a huge blind spot for me until Kurzweil pointed it out of like the amount of information and the lack of cost that the internet introduced. Like it's this insane thing where everybody has access to just so much information you couldn't consume it in a million lifetimes.
yeah, yeah.
And like it's mostly free. Like to most people in the world, information is now just freely available.
Yeah.
And that is just an insane like reduction in access price. And like it used to be that you had to be wealthy to read philosophers.
Yeah, yeah.
And like
to even have books.
you know,
Right?
to have access to books. And
Yeah.
now they're all just on the
Yeah.
Project Gutenberg, you know? Like, and so similar things, he paints this vision of a future where like energy becomes that abundant and where materials become that abundant and everybody's just
Yeah.
3D printing everything they need at home for free because everything is just renewable powered from your backyard kind of a thing. And then everybody will also have this instant access to all kinds of crazy resources. That sounds a little utopic, but
Well, one cool thing that AI already is enabling is you can just ask it to help you learn things, right? It's really quite amazing.
yeah.
I mean, I've gotten it's so weird. Like I highly recommend just spending a lot of time with it, trying to be aware that, like don't let it butter you up too much,
Yeah.
Like you can even put ChatGPT on cynical mode if you want, to be like more rude, just so it's like not making you think you're too awesome. But the reason why I say that is because like it actually takes a while to learn that you're almost better off not like trying to order it around and more just trying to like ask questions from it. Because I found that if I start to ask questions like, okay, this obviously isn't working. What would you recommend that we do in this situation? And half the time it's like, oh yeah, like I see what you're trying to do, and like I think the best way is to do this, and like, okay, let's try it. Let's see what happens, And a lot of times it does pretty well, So
Like, why are you holding out on me?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was one thing that about like compute. So we have all heard Moore's law, where it's like every 18 months or so, like equivalent price compute is like half, or another way of saying it, you can buy like twice as much compute for the same amount over 2 years. I heard like a pessimistic version of compute where every 18 months compute like increases in compute is half as useful if you see money as being like a indicator of value. But now we're at a point where that's not always the case, right? Like where GPUs are going up in price because of the marginal utility of them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's crazy.
Oh boy. Yeah, so there's a similar thing with money where like they do all these studies about like does money actually bring happiness kind of a thing, and it looks like it does up to a certain point. And then after that it only goes, it kind of has a slower climb, and then it starts to go down. And it would be terrifying if it just kept climbing.
Yeah.
I mean, already I think like people who chase money for its own sake, they're just like addicted to it, like addicted to anything else. But like, yeah, that idea that compute has just this, it now has a new way to just be more valuable.
Yeah, so it's weird because like for a while there you could buy a new computer and think this is amazing, it's so fast. And like I don't think I'm gonna need another one for years, but now it's like all of a sudden, what happened, and I think we're gonna start to see over the next couple of years a lot of inference move to your local computer. That's kind of exciting too, where things are getting good enough to where you could do some AI stuff on your own computer.
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of people who are doing little Cloudbot projects, just getting a little Mac Mini and.
Yeah.
And small models are in specific use cases can outperform these really big general purpose things too. If you're really specific in your need, you can get a small model to do really well with way fewer tokens.
And there are also improvements like almost ridiculous level of improvements where it's like, oh, we found this new approach. Like what used to take 10x is now like, like 10x is as much compute for a similar thing. Like we're still in the it feels like we're still in like very new such that like we are still seeing like dramatic changes in like how cheap things can be.
Yeah.
I'd love to see like, more of those improvements to then benefit things like data centers that are just, we're showing out in masses, like, and want so much of, and then be like, actually, we don't even need what we have, like, to get to that point would be so nice.
So on the abundance talker, having enough power where you can 3D print everything, like I'm still not sold on the abundant, like we're ushering in the age of abundance, because like throughout history, right, we've gone through 95% or this is your farming.
Yeah. And half of like people died before they were 10 and.
But like never have, with every technological advance, there's never been like, okay, now we don't have to work anymore. Right? Like I feel like no matter what we do, we're gonna find more uses for power, right? Whereas we're gonna do more with the compute, we're gonna do more. Like there's just I don't know if it's a greed cycle or a human nature of progress, right? It's like we're always trying to expand.
Are you saying that it would be like we might have what seems to be abundance from our perspective, but when we get there, we will still want more?
We're already
We're still on the grind.
Yeah.
1,000 years ago, like we're living the dream right now.
Right,
Yeah,
we're throwing out 40% of our food.
I got you.
I think the distinction.
We're still working 40-hour weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are way more productive than they used to be, but we're working more than
We're
we
even
used to.
working more.
Yeah.
Like we have dual income households.
And getting paid relatively less.
Right.
Yeah, it is
I
funny
think-
that Keynes said that like, 40 years from now at the rate we're going, like we'll only have to work 10 hours a week,
We should be there. Right?
Well, we were by his standards, but it's like we just
But we
still
just
have to-
decided we're just gonna work more.
Yeah.
Well,
Strenuous
our boss is deciding.
Yeah.
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 Well, like to me, that idea is.
I think one thing about like the abundance that changes fundamentally from previous technologies is that you can have like a drop in human replacement, or I guess that's the goal of AGI. At least on the cognitive side, the robotics are sure to follow sometime thereafter. But to have like a drop in replacement for a human, I think we will still have a human based service economy, but it will be like just absolutely dwarfed compared to like the AI economy.
So it'll be like you work 4 hours a week as a
Right, yeah.
waiter.
I'm wondering if there's another connection, I guess, to your presentation on. I was thinking along the lines of returning to the Garden of Eden, right? Where it's like you're becoming more childlike, and like part of me is like, well, is that actually a good thing? Part of I think there is a scriptural like we want to be like children, but maybe not in the sense of being innocent in that we don't know good from evil anymore.
Right, I mean, on your slide, it looked like it was like learning and playing and like communing and like, it didn't look bad.
Yeah, I feel like there's like an innate desire, human need to progress.
Yeah.
So like even if we do get to this era of abundance, we'll find something wrong. We'll find something to do.
Yeah.
There's always problems. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's
there's always
why
gonna be problems.
the Eastern philosophies, like the Catholics, the traditional Western philosophies, they're like, there's no progression. You were created by God, you're gonna die, or you're saved by grace or whatever. And that's it. And then the Eastern is also like, no, there's no progression. It's it's if you go up the levels, you're eventually going to come back down that amount. You're going to go into the hell realms, just stay in the middle and chill out, and so
It's all justification for the caste systems.
exactly.
So let me ask a Mormon theology question.
Sure.
So say President Oaks gets up in the next conference and he says, Jesus is actually gonna come next year.
Mhm.
And so he comes, the prophets in Missouri, the law in Israel, and the earth is producing fruits and flowers spontaneously. Well, what are we doing with AI?
Well, so I see, this is me, just my particular take here, but um, there's so much precedent in our own thinking and the things that have been said by various Mormon thinkers on this topic, that like seem to indicate that um, the stuff you're talking about of like a paradisiacal state of the earth really,
We're supposed to be doing
it's,
temple work.
it's not magic. The way that that would be achieved is through some kind of actual change being wrought on our environment in a way. Yeah, well, like
This is
through,
more MTA
through
fault.
through the instrumentality of someone, whether it's us or whether it's God or whether it's some collaboration between them. But the point is that God doesn't just say Aloha Mora and suddenly like there's light. Yeah, we got him Leviosa or whatever, but it's more just like that he understands the underlying principles that need to be changed in order for that change to be wrought upon the earth. And so the way I think of it is that many of these hoped for states that we think about in the future, like, are really things that will be explainable and comprehensible in a scientific way.
Well, I feel like I'm already living in the second coming. It's like,
Yeah,
I mean, I work from home. My stress is so low.
yeah,
It's like you can order food from Walmart. I mean, that's
yeah,
fruits and flowers spontaneous.
yeah.
Yeah.
I speak here, even in a different country.
I can travel anywhere I want to, it's like I'm living that state, but I know the world's not.
Sure.
And,
I think an example of this that like
Because they're wicked.
yeah, they're a bunch of evil.
an example of like this sort of change that could be within the foreseeable future. Everyone has the desire for their environment to be clean, right? And the reason why it's not clean is because of individual action, and the cost for paying someone to clean everything or make sure everything is clean is just too high according to our desire for it to be clean. But with robotics, where the cost of it to drop dramatically, there's likely a time in the future where you just like never see a piece of trash on the ground ever again, or
Yeah.
you like, or like the streets are always clean. Like
Yeah.
imagine like the cleanest place you've ever been to, and it's just like everywhere you walk. Like the rocks are always in place, and perhaps we go to places that are like set aside for like leaves to be on the ground and for like things to be scrambled a little bit, just because everything else is always in its place. Yeah.
Yeah. There, Kurzweil describes future civilization as like having intelligence embedded into it to such a degree that your environment almost just like caters to your every need or sort of adapts constantly to
Who?
situation.
Ray
Kurzweil.
Kurzweil. He's a big AI guy at Google. He's been predicting the future since the 60s, working in AI since about then.
He's the one who wrote "The Singularity is Near." He's sort of one of the early thinkers in the transhumanist space.
And the predictions are like
It's
incredibly accurate.
really good.
in terms of like his predictions regarding like the exponential rate of progress, and also of mapping like where we'd be at compute wise for given particular years. It's actually pretty remarkably good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
Almost seems like we're replacing nature.
Well,
Because
so
nature already has like without us, nature can keep the world in balance.
But what's funny about this though,
But there have been like 5 mass extinctions.
Oh, I know that, species come and go.
Yeah.
I think at a deeper level though, the idea you just talked about nature as though we're outside of nature.
No, I think we're part of it.
But I mean, I point that out because it
Yeah.
is kind of interesting how humanity is this sort of singularity in a different sense, but like in the sense that we have the ability to adapt and change our environment much more than any other
Yeah.
species. And so sometimes we do think of ourselves as being outside of nature, but we are kind of a part of it. And one of the things that another common fallacy is that like the planet would be better without us. That's sometimes something you sometimes hear from a lot of environmentalists, which I'm not saying that I'm not totally against environmentalism. I'm just saying.
Well, it goes back to consciousness. Does the planet care?
Well, it's like the thing is, let's just say theoretically that you wiped out the human race and that the planet just went back to whatever it was before.
Things
Or
eating
without-
other things to stay alive.
Without us, what would probably eventually happen is that some other intelligent species like us would emerge with the same problems that we currently have. So you just kick the can down the road when you do that. We are part of nature, and there are many ways that humans have actually curated nature in a beneficial and symbiotic way. So like the early the tribes in North America, for example, cultivated a savanna-like environment that was actually more efficient than just a forest. And they even like would do controlled burns to like cut back on the foliage a little bit. And so anyway, like there's things like that happen to nature if humans aren't taking care of it that are worse than what happens when there's a good relationship there. We haven't always kept that, but like, yeah, anyway, that was just.
I would even go so far as to say that that kind of symbiosis is the exception, because I think that we're largely still children, like we're really powerful bumblers.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Like, there's been a lot of abuses as well.
But like we're getting, I think we're close to this like solar punk symbiosis kind of state where we can not kill too many more things, and then we can just learn how to live forever and achieve exaltation and all that. But like
kind of like choice in having some faith in that like utopic world. I think it can be really fun because it's like, yeah, I would just love to see that.
Well, is the AI going to eventually have a god that controls it or that it prays to? Are we at the top of the food chain?
No.
If, just your examples where I'm just having fun, but where we die and some other intelligence raises up, I mean, doesn't AI have a right to progress and become that intelligent that eats something that's lower than itself? Because that's what the rest of at least the animal nature does. They create balance by killing enough of the thing that they're competing with, or eating enough that they're able to progress. It's kind of violent.
Yeah, nature, red in tooth and claw. Yeah, and that's the same forces that create gulags in our machines that we built.
Yeah.
That's why AI could not be good. I mean, we don't know.
Or at least not good for us, but it's good for
us.
itself.
Right.
I was wondering, like, I don't have an answer to that one yet. I think my personal view is that like the only way we will continue to retain our agency is probably if we merge with our machines. But what I mean by that is not like some weird Captain Picard Borg kind of like creature, but more just that we enhance ourselves in a way that's makes us more glorious, more Christ-like, more compassionate. But that like but this merger is already underway. Like I frequently point out that So I like to talk about the oldest technologies we have, which are clothing and controlled fire. Like both of those technologies are things that are inseparable from humanity right now. Like,
But they're not integrated. They're
But they-
tools.
they are though.
You're talking about
like
AI
nobody-
becoming
no-
inside, right?
Well, yeah, but think about it. No one walks or hardly anybody walks around naked anymore. You are, for all intents and purposes, a clothed individual. Like that's part of you.
People would like say that their phone is an extension of their hand because
Yeah, yeah.
so
I
many
can
people can't leave
And-
without their phone. That in a way, it is an example.
And
of
not only that, but you cook when you cook food and when you eat cooked food, like your whole body has changed to adapt to the food that you're now eating. Like if you were to try to go back to what you ate 500,000 years ago, it would not work. Yeah,
I
it
did
would
follow
be
that for a while, so.
But I mean, like I'm
Yeah,
talking
wrong.
way back where you spent like your whole day eating bark, you know, like, that just wouldn't work.
You're gonna have some gastrointestinal issues.
I think really cool and simple example of this, like integrating AI into our lives, is just one that Dallin has been particularly fascinated in, which are hydroponic farms, where it's just using vastly less land, vastly less water, and we are using vertical space to
Yeah.
make plants. And so imagine like a world, okay, dream time. Let's like imagine like everybody was given the opportunity to have a hydroponics farm in their home, and that was like a necessary requirement. And they made that law and they said, okay, everybody has to have their own farm and you make your own, you have an abundance of food that you're growing, and it's just all great. Like that to me is a very good example of how we would integrate with something like AI. And then you see like really cool hydroponics where they monitor and they know when to feed the water. You've got like that knows and sees when it needs to be fed, so then it feeds it automatically. That's already exists, like with the popular hydroponics you can get that are expensive.
The brand is called Garden.
They already have that where it like waters and it monitors your.
So in a way, like, yeah, this is a good point that like merging with our machines doesn't necessarily mean that we're sticking a chip in our brain, but it's more just like we've become dependent on
Right,
the-
and then all of a sudden
way
we're in
we
this
live.
abundance of water because most, like to your point, most of water is used for
Yeah,
agriculture. Like that is like the biggest, we were just watching Planet Earth 3, and it just always moves
Most
that how.
deforestation is for
Mo-
cattle.
yeah, like nine, like, yeah, most of it is for cattle, for feeding the meat that we eat and the, and feeding them. Anyway.
I was wondering, I just wanted to ask you, like, can you tell us more about your background, like what you do for a living and
Yeah.
what
If you had
And then also, if you need to go, like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, I just don't wanna make sure
this
that
guy
you're like,
tends to
yeah.
kind of-
Yeah, so and anyone who's afraid to go, like, we usually just chat for a while, so.
My background. So I'm in business intelligence in
Okay.
an insurance company.
Uh-huh.
So I've been there for a long time. I took a kind of a break to do Satori, to launch it.
Are you a software engineer though? Like,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm not like a data scientist. I'm like the I'm actually called the actuarial AI engineer.
oh, okay.
So
Uh-huh.
but basically I just support all the data scientists and the modelers and the people.
Huh. And you look kind of familiar. Were you at BYU for a while or no? Okay. Uh, Maybe I just run into you some other event or whatever.
What was the other thing?
What your background was like,
Yeah.
so I started kind of looking it up earlier. So do you have about 4 people running Satori? Or how many?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got a small team of like 4 people. And I don't do much of the coding anymore. I kind of built the foundation and all that kind of stuff. And then um I'm kind of more of a, what do you call that? Kind of behind the scenes,
Yeah.
you know, advisor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who are Satori's clients?
So Satori is an open source blockchain application.
Okay.
Right? So the clients can be whoever wants to use the open system. It's just open. It's whoever wants. And basically what it does is it says it's gone through a few iterations, a few different kinds of designs. But it basically says if you can produce and then publish, well, anybody can publish any data stream on the Satori network, first of all. So if you want to publish the price of Google or whatever, you can do that. And then the AIs that are on the network can see that data and subscribe to it. And then they can start predicting the future of that data. So basically, they make a new data stream that is the prediction of the one that they're looking at.
Okay.
And then each one of those nodes can look at multiple data streams in order to figure out which ones should they care about in order to make the best prediction of what they're looking for.
Okay.
And then does it use like smart contracts to like automatic payouts and things like that for those predictions or?
Yeah. So that's the idea. And yeah, that's if you are, it does a scoring mechanism of all the predictions. And it says, oh, okay, these were the best predictions, and then it scores those out. Basically.
So do you have an account in that you allocate money in and it uses tokens and you get money back when it predicts correctly?
Oh, right. So there's a lot of prediction markets out there.
Yeah,
Poly
Full
markets.
market, right?
This is a slightly different design. The idea is that yeah, you can have your own blockchain wallet and,
Okay.
and your AI kind of uses that wallet, but it doesn't bet. It doesn't put capital at risk and then sees if it's right.
Yeah.
Instead, the token is getting printed every day, just the same amount every day. And those rewards are what go to the predictors. So they can also say, hey, look, this company or person has put up a bounty. They want their data predicted. And so that's kind of a side.
A bounty of money
Satori
or
tokens,
of Satori tokens. So it's not a bounty of data, it's a bounty of
yeah, of the token.
But the token has some monetary value then?
Right.
Okay.
So so we built out a system that says, okay, this is just public data, you can just score it, and then the new tokens get divvied up according to the best predictors. And then we added on another system that says, well, if you have a data stream that you want predicted, you can put up a bounty, and it's kind of like that new token that's getting minted every day. It will then go to the right predictors as well. So that's kind of the 2-layer system that we have right now, and we'll do more, but yeah.
Well, thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Woo.
Yeah.